utilizing the formula editor. So for this tutorial, what I'm going to do is give you an overview of the formula editor. Now, the formula editor is a tool within Scribe Online that lets you create a simple or multifaceted formulas on the fly, as well as defining filters within advanced maps. Now, by utilizing the formula editor and the Scribe Online function library that I'm going to show you here in just a little bit, you can cleanse the data to extract the exact information that you need. So simply put, formulas allow you to change and reformat data. Now, some examples of formulas might be something like decimal conversion, converting dollars into thousands to whole dollars, or case conversion, converting fields in all capitals to initial capitalization, so proper casing. So for this tutorial, I'm going to show you two other examples, parse and concatenate. Now, just as a reminder, what parse will do is it'll return a specific token from a string of data. Now, a token is a portion of the string separated by a specified delimiter. Now, what I mean by that is simple. If I look over on my source side on my screen here, what I notice is that my contact name is all in one field. So what that means is Mr. John Smith is all in one field. However, if I look over at my target, I know that I divide those out separately. Last name goes into its own field and first name goes into its own field. So what I need to do is make sure that I have the last name go in its correct location on the target side and the first name go in the correct location on the target side. Now, the last name is its own token and the first name is its own token. So that's how we use parse. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and map the contact name over to last name. Now, by simply mapping the field, what I've already done is start the formula. So all I need to do now is go ahead and double click into that formula we've started. Now let's take a real quick tour of the formula editor. Now, the first thing you notice is the enter formula field. Now, it's already started the formula by virtue of us mapping from the source to the target. Now, if we look at the bottom half of the formula editor, what we notice is there are three distinct columns. The first column is categories. And what we notice from there is that we have query and functions. Now, what query does is it shows us the primary entity that we're going to be working with in this formula. Now, if I go over and I actually highlight that query, so we're actually highlighting customer, what you notice is the second column changes. And the second column will show us two different views depending on what we select from the category column. If I actually select that entity, what it'll do is it'll show all the fields attached to that entity. Now, if I go down to functions and I select text, what it'll do is it'll show me all the functions related to text. Now, if I go over to that actual second column, and let's say I choose parse, which was what we're going to be doing for this actual formula, you'll notice that the last column, description, changes as well. Description will match whatever we happen to select within that second column. Now, to build out our formula, we've already started by actually mapping from our source to our target. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and highlight the beginning of our formula. And next, I'm going to go ahead and choose parse. Now, there's a couple ways I can do it. I can go ahead and go down here and just simply hold down my left mouse button and drag and drop what I need to up into the edit formula field. Or I can just go ahead and double click. So what we need to do now is go ahead and finish out our formula. Now, remember, what we have here is the situation is coming over from the source, our contact name is in all one field, but when it comes into the target, we need to separate it out. So what I'm going to do is go ahead, and this is last name. So if I were actually to look at that contact name and assign a token to each part of that name, Mr. would be token 1, John would be token 2, and Smith would be token 3. So we need to go ahead and grab the last name token. So we type in 3. Now, from here, I want to point out a few things quickly. You notice that our cursor is flashing in red. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the cursor position. That's extremely handy for two reasons. One, if you happen to have an error in your formula, it'll let you know where that error is. And two, if you have a really long formula, you know where you are, where that cursor position is, by simply looking at that cursor position. Now, before you leave, you can validate your formula to make sure it's correct. But by virtue of clicking OK, it also validates the formula. So it brings us back into our Fields tab. What we notice here is that our formula is started. Now I'm going to show you something really neat. we're going to go ahead and highlight our formula, and we're going to right click, and I'm going to choose copy. Now the reason why I chose copy is that remember that from the source side the contact name is all in one field, but over here in the target we break it out. So what I'm going to do is use this formula again for my first name. So I go ahead and double click. I paste. All I simply do is change the token location. So remember that number 3 is the third token of our name, which is the last name. So the second token is actually our first name, John. And what I'm going to do is purposely break this formula for just one moment. I'm going to go ahead and take that 2 away. I'm going to click validate. And the only reason I did that is I want to show you first how validate works. And second, I wanted to point out exactly where the error will show up for your formula. So you notice it in red, and it appears right above the categories and functions column inside a formula editor. So I'm going to go ahead and return that number 2 back, fix my formula. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So that's how easy it is to use parse. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring all my formulas together. And you do that simply by clicking on the formula column header. And we see that all our formulas are together. And that's pretty handy if you're doing a lot of formulas. Now the second example I want to show you is concatenate. And for concatenate, what we're going to do is we're going to do something unique in our description. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go down in my actual target, and I'm going to find description. Next, we're going to open up the formula editor. Now, how I'm going to use formulas here is that I'm bringing over a lot of trade show leads over from my source into my target. And I'd like to let my users know that when they open up these new records, that these are actually trade show leads. So what I'm going to do is create something within the description that lets them know that. Now remember, this scenario is an example of concatenate. There's a couple ways that I can go ahead and create the concatenate. I can go ahead and free type it right into the enter formula field, or I can also combine information from the categories, whether it be query information or function information, to create the concatenate. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and free type the information I need to create my formula. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by letting the users know where this information came from. So since I am going to be creating a concatenate, what I simply do is I'm going to go ahead and use the operator for concatenate. And then if I want, I can go ahead and just select the field that I need. So what I'm going to do is use contact name. So I go down to the categories. For my entity, I go ahead and click it. You notice that it changes that second column to fields. All I simply do is double click on contact name, and it inserts it in there for me. So I go back up to the enter formula field, and I'm going to go ahead and finish out my formula. So the next thing I need to do is, since this is a concatenate, is add another operator for concatenate. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and finish out with the company name. So I've already showed you a couple ways you can go ahead and take information from the bottom and put it up into the enter formula field. I showed you drag and drop, and I also showed you double click. But there's another thing you can use called IntelliSense. Now what IntelliSense does is basically produce the lists related to the information you can use inside of that formula editor. So to activate IntelliSense, you merely press Control and the space bar on your keyboard, and what you notice is it brings up the options available to you using IntelliSense. So what I need to do to finish out the rest of my formula is find the company name. Now all I simply have to do is start typing out any portion of what I know is contained in the data that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in name. I'm going to click, I'm going to go down to OK, and that's how you use the formula editor.